Hey, what's up, everybody? Mike Dokter here again, the high school coach of the women's high school basketball team out of the house in Muskegon, Michigan. We are reading through Pound the Stone, a little bit different background here, traveling for work and about to go watch the Tigers beat the Guardians in Game 4 of the 2024 playoffs here. But before I did, I wanted to read you another couple chapters. If you're just joining us for the first time, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Please take a look at the other videos. This entire book, Pound the Stone, which is our yearly book, is online. The book prior to this, Chop Wood, Carry Water, is also online. So if you haven't read that, I'd suggest you start there. Full playlist. Go ahead and like it and let me know what you think. So we're going to read chapter 46 and 47 in this video. So chapter 46, Hole on the Inside. Curious, Jason ripped through the wrapping paper, opening the box. Inside was the very same luxury smartwatch that he had tried to steal. Jason was stunned. Thanks, but why did you get me this? Well, I know from personal experience how much a watch like that can mean. When I was 23 years old, my father passed away from cancer. He wasn't a great father, but one thing he did do was always to show his love by giving me special gifts on my birthdays. 10 years after he passed away, I had just launched my first business and it was really taking off. One day I was playing golf with a friend and he showed up with a brand new presidential Rolex. Something about it made me so angry that it nearly spoiled our time together, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. The next day the anger turned to jealousy and I found myself desperately wanting a Rolex. I went to the jewelry store and I found one that I wanted, and it was just over $10,000. I spent 3 days obsessing over figuring out any possible way to buy this watch. It was driving me crazy. Then Jan had a brilliant insight that unlocked why it meant so much to me. My obsession with that watch wasn't really about the watch at all. It was about missing my father. You see, the business I launched was one we had talked about when he was alive. And just after turning 30, having launched that business successfully, I just knew he would have gotten me a Rolex. Once I realized this, I finally felt free to surrender that watch. Now, Jason, I've never prayed for outcomes in my life. I don't want to treat my relationship with God like he is some kind of divine vending machine. But I had a hard time explaining what happened next. I never prayed for the Rolex. In fact, I had been surrendering the stupid thing every morning during my gratefulness prayer and meditation so I could get back to my purposeful work. But the next day I got a call from my publisher telling me that a large order was just placed from one of my books, and the check was in the mail. Sure enough, it arrived the next day. I opened it, and I couldn't believe my eyes. The check covered the Rolex, including taxes and insurance. Never before or after did I have an order for one of my books that was anywhere near that size. It felt as if God was saying in that moment, I'm your dad, and you aren't missing out on anything. Whoa. Jason's wide eyes landed on the worn Rolex on Russ's wrist. Is that it? Sure is. I even had it engraved. Russ slipped it off, turning it over to reveal an engraving on the back plate. Love, Dad, 7685. Russ went on. Now, the point of that story wasn't that getting the watch can fill the hole in your heart. It's actually the opposite. But I understand why you stole the watch, and I'm here to tell you that you aren't missing out on anything either. Jason looked at the watch. It seemed foolish now. Yeah, I know that. It's just when I saw Trey got it for his birthday, it made me really sad that I didn't have a father who would get me gifts like that. I know you're still trying to fill the hole inside of you left by your father's wounds. The truth is that no thing or achievement or human relationship can fill that hole. Only when you experience, understand, and fully embrace reckless, unconditional, and scandalous love of your Creator will you ever feel the hole on the inside, or will you ever feel whole on the inside. You don't have to believe me, Jason, but you also don't have to look that hard to find a lot of people becoming more and more frustrated and lost by trying to fill that hole we all have with achievements, stuff, and fallible people. A wise man once said, go out and get what you want, and you'll be happy. A wise man once said the idea of go out and get what you want and you'll be happy is a failed experiment. You can never get enough of what you don't need. I learned that stuff only leaves us with the desire for more. Achievements only give us temporary high and then leave us feeling more and more empty. People eventually let us down because they're all human just like we are. I got this watch for you so that you will see for yourself how little it will change. It might make you feel good for a week or maybe a month, but it won't last. As they got out, Russ gave Jason a crushing hug. You know that I love you, Jason. Jason nodded awkwardly. Yeah, good, Russ nodded. But you still have to pay off that watch. Wait, really? Yes, really. Jason shifted. Okay, it might take me a while, though. It's worth a lot of money. Oh, I know, Russ grinned. And I guess you might even need a summer job. Jason sensed what he was getting at and smiled back. After the season he had just had, the thought of jumping into the summer playing AAU ball wasn't one that he was genuinely excited about. Plus, he knew that his mom needed the money, and he still hadn't beaten his first-year goal of selling 1,200 books. He also knew that by now, the process is what mattered, not the outcome. But that's why he just didn't want to do this. He needed to. He had pounded the stone going door to door for the past 2 summers. He needed to do it again for a third. All right, so that chapter is fantastic. I love the point of that chapter in that, we are in a situation where we often feel like what is missing in our life is more things or more experiences or whatever else. And there's nothing wrong with things. There's nothing wrong with a nice car. There's nothing wrong with a nice house. There's nothing wrong with nice clothes. There's nothing wrong inherently with those things. But what it's important to remember is that those are just things. Those are just things. And anytime we put our value or our satisfaction in something that can be taken away from us, or something that can break, or something that can go away, we're setting ourselves up for massive amounts of disappointment. I've said that before, either in the last video series or in this video series. The only truly thing that we need to put our value in is something that can't be taken away from us, something that is infallible, something that is everlasting, something that is never, ever, ever going to be able to be stripped away. And if we can, the sooner we can figure out how to do that, and the sooner we can understand that things are just things and they don't necessarily matter. And quite honestly, our relationships with people kind of fall in that category too. Anytime we put all of our value into a relationship, what if that relationship ends? What if, God forbid, you get divorced, or a family member dies, or your best friend is no longer your best friend anymore? All of your value, all of your identity, if it goes into that thing and it can be taken away from you, it's all like chaff in the wind, to use a quote from a book that's written 6,000 years ago, and then again 2,000 years ago. We got to be smarter than that. We got to be more in tune with that about what this type of stuff actually means. So that was chapter 46. Chapter 47, no shortcuts. Jason started his first day of his third summer selling books with a whole new strategy. Instead of going door to door to individual houses, he planned to only sell to businesses or larger potential buyers like libraries. Why waste time selling 1 or 2 or 5 books at a time when he could sell 2 or 5 dozen instead? Jason mapped out a list of all the biggest potential clients in the territory and started there. And for the first week, it worked. He sold dozens of books each day, logging more and more orders his first week than he had in his first month last summer. As much as he heard Russ's voice in his head telling him to focus on the long game and who you become, Jason couldn't help but smiling at the end of each day. It just felt good to be selling this many books. But then the numbers began to drop off. And it was like everyone had suddenly decided that they weren't interested in buying books anymore. Jason knew better than to freak out. He expected bumps in the road, so he adjusted his strategy and began targeting mid-level businesses and smaller libraries. He restructured his pitch to be less about the value of the bulk purchase and more about the value of the books themselves. Again, this worked for a week or so, and while he wasn't selling as many as a couple weeks before, the numbers were still decent. Then again, his sales hit a brick wall. And this time, there was nothing he could do to jumpstart them. After a week and a half of striking out completely, Jason started to worry. He was now 5 weeks into the summer, and while he wasn't keeping count, he sensed that he was probably behind on his numbers from last year at this point. Desperate to crack the problem, Jason stayed home from basketball practice one night. He covered the kitchen table with papers, reading through his notes from last summer and the last 2 summers. Still, no solution emerged. Looks like you could use a hand. Russ looked over his shoulder, studying the papers. Jason shrugged. I just can't figure it out. I've hit a wall. As he explained the situation to Russ, a smile grew across the older man's face. Jason, you're falling into the oldest trick in the book. Wait, what do you mean? You know the story of the tortoise and the hare, right? Jason nodded. Then you already know the trick. The trick is believing that shortcuts work. That simply by going fast in leaps and bounds, you can get to the finish line first. Jason shoved the papers away from him in frustration. But it makes sense. If I just sell to bigger buyers, even if I make less sales, I'll sell more books in total. Are you sure? What do the numbers say? They did some quick multiplication and division, and Russ showed Jason the projected sales rate for the summer. Still think that's a good idea? As he entered the total, Jason's mouth dropped open. The numbers didn't lie. At his current rate, he was set to sell even less than last summer. Most people lose because they are trying to take shortcuts. But there are no shortcuts. Did you know Michael Phelps? Do you know why Michael Phelps is the greatest Olympian of all time? He never took a shortcut. He once went 5 straight years, 365 days per year, without missing a workout. Can you imagine the willpower, grit, and discipline it took to do that? And it paid off. He won one of his gold medals by less than 1/100th of a second. I know I've said this to you before, but Jason, talent is overrated. It's the little things done consistently and remarkably that make the actual difference. According to the data from the National Sales Executive Association, 48% of people in sales never follow up with their prospective client. 25% of people in sales stop after the follow-up contact. 12% of people in sales stop after the third contact. 90% of people in sales make no more than 3 contacts. 2% of sales are made on the first contact. 3% of sales are made on the second contact. 5% of sales are made on the third contact. 10% of sales are made on the fourth contact. And over 75% of sales are made somewhere between the 5th and 12th contact. How much talent does it take to follow up with someone over and over again? Jason shook his head. None. Exactly. There are no shortcuts to sustain greatness. It takes what it takes. If you don't believe me, watch this. Russ opened his iPad and brought up a video on YouTube called Speed, a Gary Vaynerchuk original. After the video finished, Russ said, Gary is one of the world's most successful entrepreneurs, not because he's faster in his day-to-day execution, even though that is world-class. He is who he is because of his world-class patience. Just like Michael Phelps, he knows that there are no shortcuts. He understands that it takes 5, 10, 20, 30 years to truly build what he wants. He's completely committed to the process because he knows that it takes what it takes. I heard you listening to John Legend the other day. Did you know that it took him 20 years to get a record deal? Jason was shocked. No way. Russ continued. It's true. He started playing the piano at 4 years old and publicly performing at 6. It wasn't until just before his 26th birthday that he got his record deal, long after he believed he deserved it and was good enough. He talks too about the importance of staying true to the process and being persistent. Jason nodded in stubborn frustration, but he did understand. I promise you, Jason, building anything that is sustainably successful, whether it's a great marriage or a career or a business in sports, only comes from developing the character to make the patient, long-term choices instead of the short-term ones that are driven by instant gratification. People will take shortcuts instead of doing the work. But the truth is that those shortcuts really are just dead ends or detours. Why? Because, Jason answered with conviction, there are no shortcuts. I love that too. Man, 2 good chapters in a row. Makes me want to keep reading to you instead of going and watching the Tigers. There are no shortcuts. It takes what it takes. I watched a video this morning and I posted a still on Instagram that I made in Canva of Isaiah Thomas, not the 80s Isaiah Thomas, but the 2000s Isaiah Thomas. And he was giving a talk and he said that opportunity doesn't go away. It just passes to somebody else. And that is true. There's opportunities out there everywhere. And the world is competitive. And the reality is it takes what it takes to achieve your goals. If you have a goal, it takes what it takes to get there. It takes getting up early. It takes staying late. It takes consistency and persistency. There are no shortcuts. There are no things that you can do to try to get a leg up on what it actually takes for sustainable success. You might see short-term gratification. You might see short-term success. You might see short-term numbers. But the sustainable success comes with developing the pattern, the consistency, the persistency, and the love of the process that can actually get you to change your lifestyle and who you are as a person to be that successful individual and to be able to push through any of the challenges that life ends up throwing at you. To go 20 years consistently and persistently performing at a record, to try and get a record deal like John Legend, to produce video after video after video after video like Gary Vaynerchuk, to attempt to build a media brand. The guy was he worked for his dad's wine shop. That's what he did. That's how he started. He started by tasting wine on YouTube. He was that guy. And he would just talk about what he thought about the wine. And that's how he started. Anybody can do this. Anybody can persistently and consistently pursue their dream. And only a very lucky few actually have it pay off for them instantly. And most of it's luck. And quite honestly, if it does pay off for them instantly, they haven't developed the temperament, the grit, the persistence, and the consistency that they need in order to have that success be sustainable. So my advice from that chapter, my interpretation of that chapter, and Joshua Medcalf's advice from, again, Pound the Stone, our year 2 book, is to be consistent and persistent. It's much better off in the long run. So we'll see you guys. Bye now. Go Tigers!